Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping into a masterclass. I'm speaking directly to you right now, the therapists, the healers, the space holders, who are really ready to fundamentally elevate your practice. We're looking at a fascinating framework from the source material called the Alchemical Inversion, a protocol for spiritual sovereignty. And look, this isn't just about giving your clients slightly better coping mechanisms to get through the week. No, this is about facilitating a complete internal takeover, where they become the absolute accountable pilots of their own flow. So I want you to think about this for a second. Are you a repairman or an architect of autonomy? It's a pretty provocative question, isn't it? Our current clinical identity often traps us in this exhausting role of fixing broken people, right? We manage their pain, we hand them a set of tools just to survive. But the framework we're exploring today completely challenges us to stop fixing. When we start filtering for clients who are genuinely ready to trade the comfort of their victimhood for the instability of true sovereignty, we step out of that repairman role entirely. We actually start building their total independence. All right, let's look at the roadmap. Today's syllabus covers 5 distinct phases: the bold consultation, surviving the hangover, mapping ego traps, the core alchemical inversion protocol, and finally, your most powerful tool, the power of stillness. Let's dive right in. Section 1. The bold consultation, from symptom checking to sovereignty vetting. The absolute shift in your practice doesn't happen during some deep breakthrough in session 5. It actually begins before the client even sits down in your chair. There's a really stark contrast we have to draw here. The old way, traditional therapy, often keeps you trapped managing pain. You're essentially holding the client's water wings to keep them afloat, serving as their permanent safety net. But the new way, it's almost an anti-therapy approach. You're automating their power. You are demanding spiritual sovereignty. You're acting as a mirror, not a savior. This entire process relies on them fully owning their life choices. You have to make it explicitly clear right out of the gate that you are not there to entertain external blame, and you're definitely not there to listen to comfortable stories about past versions of themselves. You are there to train the I am that remains. So how do we practically do that? Well, it starts with a sovereignty invitation. First, you completely subvert the patient expectation by telling them outright that you aren't here just to manage their pain. Then you establish a firm no-blame contract. If a client is just looking for a place to park their victimhood, you're simply not their guide. Next up, you present the instability test. You literally ask them if they are willing to feel unstable, to embrace a deliberate wobble in order to gain permanent power. And then you stop talking. You watch their body. Do they lean in? Does their spine straighten? If they meet your gaze with that spark of yes, they're ready. And finally, you hand off the reins immediately. You let them know that sitting in that chair means they are deciding to be the alchemist. Which brings us to Section 2, surviving the vulnerability hangover, preparing for the ego snapback. Because here's the biological reality. Once they say yes and have that massive breakthrough, their ego is going to panic. It will aggressively try to force those water wings right back on. The brain stays in this highly aroused state during a breakthrough, and then it recalibrates. This emotional come-down isn't a mistake. It's just a nervous system adjustment. But you've got to watch out for the ego's tricks here, because the ego is a very stubborn, very clever little machine. It's going to flood them with shame, whispering things like, "Oh man, you overshared, you're unsafe now." The sovereign response you need to teach them is, "I am brave, I am breaking barriers." Or the ego might bring on heavy physical exhaustion, groaning, "This is way too hard, let's just go back to sleep." The response, "Nope, this is just the messy middle where I grow." And be highly aware of urgency. The ego will demand they quit their job or burn their whole life down right now to fix the immediate discomfort. The rule here is absolute. Wait 48 hours. You absolutely have to prepare them for this snapback, or they'll self-sabotage their own growth. So they've survived the hangover. Awesome. But what waits in that gap between the insight and real, lasting action? Section 3. Mapping the ego traps. Identifying the sentinels of the old self. I love the terminology used in the source here. Sentinels. They're basically these archaic guards still faithfully manning a post for an old self that isn't even under threat anymore. You have to help your clients recognize these conditioned characters. There's the trap of righteousness, which puffs its chest out, convinced that being right is the exact same thing as being safe. Then there's the trap of perfectionism, holding a strict little clipboard, harshly judging any tiny mistake as proof that their whole breakthrough was a sham. And the trap of impulsivity, that's the one that pulls the fire alarm, triggering that primal urge to endlessly scroll on their phone or over-apologize just to escape the discomfort. To defeat these sentinels, you teach them somatic sourcing. That means anchoring into the physical feeling of their deeper truth, like the steady depth of their breath. And crucially, you teach them to externalize the trap. They stop saying, I am anxious, and they start saying, okay, that's just my ego trying to be the boss of everything again. It creates this massive vital space between their true self and their protective parts. And that leads us to the core protocol. Section 4, the alchemical inversion. Using trigger energy as sovereign fuel. This is the ultimate flow device, guys. This is where your clients stop merely surviving their triggers and they start actually using the trigger's explosive energy to launch themselves into sovereign power. It's a complete transition from doing therapy to being power. Let's walk through the 4 phases. Phase 1 is the pulse. The exact moment they feel a tightness in their throat or sudden sense of smallness, they don't back away. They detect that density as fuel. Phase 2 is the inversion. They breathe straight into the restriction. As their chest tightens, they physically and energetically counter-expand, pushing their awareness slowly through the tightness until it literally pops. They're using the ego's own effort to pry the doorway wide open. Phase 3 is the embodied truth. That aha moment becomes a vibration. They stand in the clearance created by that pry, fully inhabiting the felt sense of strength. And finally, Phase 4, the sovereign walk. They carry this inner temple out into the world. They aren't returning to themselves because they realize they never left. To actually get them there in the room, you facilitate a live, controlled spark session, what the source calls the first flight protocol. Here's exactly how you do it. First, the invitational trigger. You ask them to summon a minor, nagging old life shadow. When you see them physically brace, their jaw tightens, shoulders round, you stop them. Step 2, the physical lever. Have them put one hand on where they feel that dense shadow and the other hand on their heart. Tell them to breathe directly into the fear, expanding their ribs against it until the fear literally has no room left. Step 3, the inversion snap. At the absolute peak of that pressure, you give a sharp cue. You clap or you command, rise. They immediately drop their hands, lengthen their spine, and exhale powerfully. They're stepping over from fear to dominating the space. And step 4, the immediate harvest. Before their ego can even formulate a sentence, you ask, where is the strength located right now? When they feel that warmth or clarity, you remind them, they didn't just find it, they built it, right out of that old fear. It all boils down to this simple, beautiful formula: trigger plus immediate expansion equals power. The nervous system learns that every single time a shadow appears, it's followed by a massive internal rise. The scary things literally become the invigorating things. They don't need you to hold the water rings anymore because they just learned how to use their own fins. So, what is your role once they've successfully inverted a block into a bridge? This brings us to the climax of the explainer, and honestly, the single most important lesson for you as a practitioner. Section 5, the power of stillness, the master's ultimate tool. Because after a successful first live inversion, you're going to notice a sovereign silence in the room. The energetic weight of the entire space fundamentally shifts. Their voice will often drop a full octave, instantly clearing out that old frantic storytelling tone. A stillness in motion emerges. They aren't trying to be strong anymore, they've simply stopped being weak. You'll feel a hum of unshakable neutrality. They can look at their old shadows without flinching because they are now entirely too large to be bothered by them. And you will feel a profound stepping back of your own energy because there's literally no more room in their vestibule for you to pilot them. They're fully occupying their own I am. So how do you acknowledge this massive shift? The source is absolutely clear on this. Meet them in the stillness. When you encounter that deep, settling resonance, any attempt to verbally praise it or analyze it usually acts like a leak in the container. Don't do it. By offering a simple, knowing nod or a steady gaze that doesn't blink, you act as a mirror of sovereignty. You aren't teaching them in that moment. You are simply witnessing that they have arrived. This is absolutely crucial. Your complete lack of interference, your profound silence, becomes the high-frequency yes that confirms they are finally home. It is your exact lack of holding them that forces the client to feel the magnificent weight of their own reins. To hold space for this profound internal takeover without accidentally reaching in to steady them, you must fiercely protect your own energy boundaries. Here are 4 energetic anchors for your practice. First, put on the observer's mantle. Remind yourself constantly, their wobble is their medicine. My stillness is their map. Second, at the pre-session threshold, look at the empty chair and silently declare, I only speak to the pilot. Consciously choose to see the sovereign spirit, never the victim. Third, practice a completion ritual. After a session, go physically wash your hands with the specific intention of returning all the power and the reins to the client. Keep your own vestibule absolutely clear. And finally, do a weekly boldness audit. Honestly ask yourself, am I still holding the reins for anyone here? If yes, plan a live inversion to hand them right back. Which leaves us with this final, vital question for you to reflect on. Now that you know they can eat the energy of their own fears, do you still need to hold their water wings? The answer is no. You've provided the safe container for them to tune into their own broadcast. They aren't just patched up. They are completely autonomous. You have stopped being a repairman, and you are now a true architect of autonomy. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Get out there and go build those sovereign spirits.